All right, welcome back to ABA exam review and the continuation of our RBT practice exam series. We're going through another set of questions together and breaking them down. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. Please like and subscribe. Check out btexamreview.com for all of our study materials, including our combo pack. When you pass your exam, please let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. Let's get going. A behavior technician implements an extinction procedure for her client's hand-raising behavior, which was previously reinforced by attention. After a few weeks, the client stops raising their hand as often. However, one day the client unexpectedly raises their hand again. What likely has occurred? So let's think about the situation at hand because we're trying to figure out what has occurred, what has happened. What do we know so far? Well, the key here is we know the technician has implemented extinction for hand raising, and this was previously reinforced by attention. We also know extinction appears to be effective because the client stopped raising their hand as often. And the whole point of extinction is to decrease a behavior by withholding reinforcement. So it appears that our extinction procedure was effective because the target behavior decreased. Now, when a behavior that was effectively put on extinction starts to come back, starts to recover, what do we call that? Because the client is unexpectedly raising their hand again. What likely has occurred? A, non-contingent reinforcement. Non-contingent reinforcement, one, is a strategy, and two, there's no indication based on this information that that's taken place. There's a much better, simpler explanation for the emergence or reemergence of this behavior. Is it an extinction burst? Well, an extinction burst happens prior to that behavior decreasing. So the client stopping raising hands as often would have happened after the extinction burst. It's a spontaneous recovery. Most likely, spontaneous recovery occurs once a behavior has been put on extinction, that behavior is decreased. When that behavior starts to come back, it's typically considered spontaneous recovery. And then overgeneralization, we're not talking about the client raising their hand in the wrong place or the wrong time. It's just too often. That's the target behavior for decrease, which we effectively decreased, but then it came back, and now we're looking at spontaneous recovery. Melissa is working with the client in a classroom setting. The client has a choice between two tasks, completing math worksheets, which results in 5 minutes of playtime, or reading a book, which results in 2 minutes of playtime. Melissa notices that the client chooses the math worksheets more often because playtime is greater. What concept is demonstrated by the client choosing worksheets? All right, so let's think about this. We have a situation where a client is choosing worksheets. Now, why does that matter? Well, the client is given a choice between two tasks. If he does worksheets, or if they do worksheets, they get 5 minutes of playtime. If they read a book, they get 2 minutes of playtime. Now, what do you notice the difference there besides the task? Well, the amount of reinforcement or the amount of playtime. When they complete the math worksheets, they get 5 minutes of playtime versus only 2 minutes for reading a book. And so there's a very specific concept that says that behavior is going to go where the reinforcement is. If they're getting more reinforcement for math worksheets than for reading a book, well, that's likely why they're choosing to do math worksheets more often, because they get more playtime. So what is that concept or idea called? A, the Premack principle. The Premack principle is based on the idea that we can use the opportunity to engage in a preferred response as reinforcement for a non-preferred response. We're not necessarily looking at the Premack principle here. We're talking about the choice between two tasks, and the choice being the one more often that gives more reinforcement. So the concept is considered matching law. Matching law says, again, our behavior is going to go where reinforcement is and at a more often pace or a higher rate, which is in this case why the client is choosing worksheets more often, because they're getting more playtime. Reinforcement schedules. Now be careful. We are looking at some sort of potential schedules here, but all we really know is the amount of reinforcement they receive. we don't really know the schedules, and that's not what we're looking for either in the choice. So be careful with C. It's appealing, it just doesn't fit. And then D, extinction. Well, we're not talking about extinction when we talk about the client choosing. We're not putting the behavior on extinction. The client's simply choosing one over the other, and they're choosing it more often because of matching law. Marcus tells his soccer players that they are going to start with 3 easy shots on goal, and then they should take a difficult shot on goal. Marcus is attempting to build behavior momentum with his players. What idea is associated with Marcus's strategy? All right, very straightforward question, because the question is basically telling you the answer. And where does this tell us the answer? Well, we know Marcus tells the soccer players start with 3 easy shots on goal and then take a difficult shot. Okay, it's leading us down the right trail, but then it says Marcus wants to build behavior momentum. Now, what strategy do we use to build behavior momentum? A high P or high probability request sequence. Yes, we use a high P request sequence to build up that behavior momentum. You give a high probability request, another high probability request, another high probability request, and then you go with the low probability request. We're trying to gain behavior momentum. This question, essentially, if you have fluency, has told you the answer. Very straightforward question. Again, it's not the pre-mac principle. We already talked about the pre-mac principle in the last question. It's not about building behavior momentum with the pre-mac principle. It's about taking advantage of a known preferred response as reinforcement. It isn't non-contingent reinforcement because we're talking about these responses and this sequence of responses. And then it isn't response deprivation. We're not depriving soccer players of engaging in a response. We're just trying to build up to the more difficult response. We're doing that through behavior momentum, and we're doing that through a high P request sequence. A team of technicians need to track how often a client screams when denied access to his iPad. The behavior analyst wants every instance of screaming recorded. What measurement should not be used? Keyword, read carefully, not. So we're looking for a measurement that we should not use, meaning 3 of these answer choices, more than likely, we could use. Now, what do we know? We know we want to track how often a client screams, and we want every instance of screaming recorded. And that's very important, because if we want every single time it happens, we have to continuously measure the behavior. And if we're continuously measuring the behavior, there are certain measurements that aren't necessarily going to fit. So look at A, frequency. Frequency is continuous. Frequency is every time it occurs, we're continuously measuring that behavior. What about rate? Well, rate is also continuous measurement. It also is tied to frequency, given the fact that rate is frequency over time. What about momentary time sampling? Momentary time sampling is a discontinuous measurement procedure. It has to do with a sample of time, not necessarily the entire session or the entire measurement opportunity. If we're using momentary time sampling, if we're using discontinuous measurement, we're typically not capturing every instance of screaming or a behavior. And then duration, also continuous, also capturing every instance. Again, could be used. We're looking for the answer. What should not be used, and out of these 4, it's going to be the discontinuous measurement procedure. We use multiple prompting strategies during service delivery. Allowing the client to respond without a prompt would be the highest level of blank, while errorless teaching would be the highest level of blank. So we've got kind of a fill in the blank question here. We're talking prompting strategies, and we need to answer the first one, which is allowing the client to respond without a prompt. Basically, if you just give the client a chance to respond, don't prompt at all, what would that be? Would that be most to least to most, graduated guidance, or least to most? Well, that's going to be least to most prompting. If you're not using a prompt, that is the least amount of prompt we can give. So allowing the client to respond without a prompt is the highest level of least to most. Now, what about errorless teaching? It's the opposite. With errorless teaching, we're going to give as much prompting as necessary so that the client can't get it wrong. So is that going to be least to most? Well, we already have least to most in the last one. Is it most to least? Yes, errorless teaching is going to be the highest level of most to least prompting. And so we put the two together. Allowing the client to respond without a prompt is least to most prompting. Errorless teaching is most to least prompting. Thanks for watching. Check out btexamreview.com for all of our study materials. Make sure you click that like button, that subscribe button. And when you pass your exam, let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. See you soon.